Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good evening. Happy to be here. Happy to have you all here. It's been a while, and I'm excited to be back doing a couple of these Q&As or some of these live streams. Hopefully, we'll be getting them ramped back up. It's all for the best of reasons, though. As those of you who are close with my family know, we welcomed in our second little man about a month ago, and so timing was great for his arrival, but maybe not for the live streams. But he is doing really well and has given me full permission to have a live stream here tonight. So very excited to be here. I'm seeing some familiar names and faces there in the chat. We've got hashtag from Tangent Trails. He's going to be hiking the trail this year. We've got Elderberry in the mix as well. Some new faces there with backpacking vibes. And I believe I know Bill Powell. I'm sorry, Bill, if I believe we've talked at some point. So welcome back as well. So my apologies if I'm just getting my brain mixed up. So here's what's going to happen tonight is we're going to answer all of your questions. So if you have pressing questions, we're going to be here to answer those. But to make sure that you're not getting just one Snack Box's perspective, I've got a couple of my favorite Tramily members. I didn't hike a ton with them, but I consider them at least my Tramily if I'm not part of theirs. And I'm going to give a couple of quick introductions here. We've got Mosey in. He is a class of 2021 completer. He is just one of the best people to find on trail, and you might actually get to see him on trail again at some point in the near future. So I'd encourage you to say hello. Mo, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
You as well. You as well. Thanks for stopping by this Sunday night. Happy to have you here.
Of course.
And then we've got another, just a lively returner, second visit here, maybe third visit. We've got Cool Trail Mom, and CT Mom is a lasher who finished the trail in 2021, but then also Mosian and Mo and CT Mom both made their way out to California the following year and knocked out the John Muir Trail. And if I'm not mistaken, CT Mom, you were taking on the long trail this year after no small amount of preparation. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
That's great. That's great. So any other big trips on the horizon for either of you?
I'm if my knee cooperates, I'm planning on doing a little bit of the CT this year.
That's perfect. Yep. I'm looking forward to both the CT hikes that are coming out this year, especially because it looks like, knock on wood, this might not be quite as snowy as last year. And then also it just seems like a really great group of people in the 2024 Facebook group. So I'm excited to see who all makes their way out there. And then also excited to see your trip adventure CT Mom on the long trail. That is, for those of you who don't know, the Vermont Long Trail is the original long trail. This is the one that actually inspired the AT. Benton Mackay was hiking there when he was a young man, and then we can get into the thick of it. But basically, when his wife passed away, suddenly he went away to a socialist camp and figured out what he was going to do next, and that's when he generated the idea of the AT. And so the long trail is just phenomenal, and so really excited about that one. And for many of you who have ever heard of is it CT Mom? Is it the Triple Tiara that they call it?
Yeah, the Triple Hat or the Triple Tiara. It's sort of the most beautiful sections of the three long trails, and so it's supposed to be fantastic. The John Muir Trail, the CT, and the Vermont Long Trail. So
yep. And each of those trails, as you were mentioning, are they sort of overlap many of the miles. So the PCT and the JMT share about 200, maybe 190 miles of shared footpath, maybe a little less than that. The Colorado Trail shares no small amount of mileage with the CDT, and then there are some shared miles with the Vermont Long Trail and the AT.
Yeah, I think it's about 100.
I think that sounds about right. A lot of people who do the AT knock out the long trail as well, sort of as a part of it. And if you ever make your way up there to Vermont, the rest of you, be sure to check out the Long Trail Ale. That one is my absolute favorite beer of all time. So, Whitney, I expect you to bring some of that back for me when you make your way out there.
I'll definitely carry it the next 150 miles to get it to the end for you.
You can buy it on the way to the airport back. You don't have to hike with it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of new faces here in the group. We've got Huck Outdoors. If you've not checked out his channel, he does some really phenomenal trips out there in Southern California on the Eastern Sierra. He's got a really great trip video that just posted, I think, earlier last week out in Joshua Tree, which is high on my bucket list. That's a really cool national park. relatively new by way of national parks. I think it was 1994 was made a national park. And then from Florence, Alabama, we've got J Mash there. He's going to tackle about a week of the trail. J Mash, I owe you an email, and I will be sure to get that out to you. But I really appreciate the message you sent me earlier this week. So be expecting to see my name pop up in your email box sometime soon. For those of you who are watching along with the live stream here, if you have questions about your upcoming hike, feel free to pop those in the chat. There's no question that isn't good, specifically because if you are even kind of wondering about it, chances are good that somebody else in the crowd is wondering about it. Or alternately, if you have hiked a lot of the trail and you have some ideas of things that people need to know, feel free to put those into the chat as well, and we can kind of kick around those ideas also. Just as a matter of kind of rolling the ball a little bit, one of the questions that I received frequently is, how do you get from the airport to the trailhead? What's the best way to go it's a long stretch. You're talking, what is that, about 45 miles from DIA all the way to Waterton Canyon Trailhead? It's no small stretch. So the two of you live in Denver, but what are your recommendations for folks who are trying to make their way out to the trailhead efficiently?
The best, I think the best and easiest route is to call Cool Trail Mom. I hear that she is very willing to ferry people.
I have shuttled for a few people, but yeah, putting it on the Facebook group and getting a shuttle is not super difficult. It's definitely one of the options. If you need fuel because you didn't fly with it and you didn't ship, there's the REI in down. Is that the big one? There's an REI in downtown Denver, so you can take the light rail, which is a train from the airport to downtown Denver, walk to REI, and then you can take the light rail. You can walk back to the light rail and take it down to Littleton. I think it's Mineral is the stop. And from there, you could probably get an Uber or whatever. But the other way is if so that's the cheapest. If you have a little bit more cash, then you could Uber from REI and get directly dropped at the trailhead. So
there is a list of people on the Colorado Trails website that have volunteered to ferry people around, and some of them are listed for Denver to Waterton. So that's also something to check into.
Yep, that list, I think there may be some changes coming to that list. And so some people have mentioned that there's been a bit of a delay. I can't confirm that, but I do find that list to be infinitely helpful. And it's a really great way to go, specifically because you know that you're dealing with somebody who's familiar with the trail and somebody who knows some of the challenges. And so those are a great way to go, because it's not just like, an Uber's great. I've done that before, but you can also absolutely get great intel from folks who are, on that shuttlers list as well. So be sure to check that list out as well. I might need to go take that dog and, I don't know, drop it off on the other side of town or something.
There was a question on the Facebook group. Somebody was planning on getting in really late on a flight and getting to Waterton and then just starting hiking. And Waterton is closed from dusk to dawn, like an hour after dusk or before dawn, whatever the thing. So check that. For that specific situation, either stay in a hostel, stay in a motel near Littleton, or there are campsites nearby at Chatfield, but they go quick. So that's a reserving situation. But just to put it out there that no, you absolutely cannot start the trail at night. It's Denver water and it is locked shut with a gate. It is not a possibility.
And besides that, if you jump the gate, there are mountain lions that patrol the area. Yeah.
And it's not a great camping area anyway, right? And so when you get through, first of all, you've got a 6-mile sort of walk through effectively a dirt road, not even effectively, just on a dirt road paralleling the water. But then you also, so you can't really camp there. And then when you get to the end, you've got a few miles before it ever levels off there at, I believe it's Bear Creek is the first one. And it's a much smaller campsite. And you can't roll in there late at night because whoever's camping there will have that camp spot early. So I definitely, I'm with you. CT Mom and I actually started the trail early one morning a couple of years ago, and that is absolutely the way to do it, because if you get out there at about 8 in the morning, then you're still in the shade for as long as possible. And it actually, even though it's really flat, it's only 100 feet of elevation gain over the course of that 6 miles. If you do it in the middle of the day, it's very hard way to start because the sun just really pummels you. So certainly recommend starting a little bit later. There are a couple of hostels in the area as well. You can find people who are willing to share Ubers, for example, if you do a little bit of coordination there on the Facebook group. There are a lot of different ways to go about it. My personal favorite way to do it is sort of what you described already. I take the train from DIA downtown to Union Station, walk to REI, get my canister of fuel, hop back on the train, go to the end of the stop, and then call an Uber. Takes a little bit of time, but it's certainly worth it if you're dead set on getting out early that day. Otherwise, start up early the next morning. We've got a great question here. This one is sort of it's some pretty inside baseball, I think. Some really good knowledge here to be able to ask this question. So what Bill's asking here is he's saying he's thinking of slack packing while in Breckenridge. I'm going to bust a copper and hike back early to Breckenridge, and the thoughts on this. So for those of you who don't know what Bill's talking about, it's a terrific idea. And so what it is that there is a free bus service that goes from Copper Mountain to Frisco, and then you can catch a connection down to Breckenridge. It doesn't take very long, maybe a couple hours. And so what a lot of people do is get a hotel or a hostel room in Breckenridge for 2 nights. And the second day they take the bus and start the trail in Copper and hike back to Gold Hill Trailhead, where there's also a pickup on that bus stop. Or they go the other way. They get dropped off at Gold Hill, hike all the way to Copper, hop the bus and come back that way. It's a terrific way to go because slack packing, which is basically taking only what you need and none of those big heavy gear items, really great way to go. But I want to drill down a little bit. So for the two of you, I want to drill down on this idea of sort of starting at Copper as opposed to starting at Gold Hill. So what are your thoughts on if you hike back to Copper, or I'm sorry, you go to Copper and then hike back to Breckenridge, or vice versa? What would you recommend?
I personally slack packed Copper to Breckenridge, and I think that's the way I would recommend doing it. The initial part at Copper is quite steep for quite some time, and then which is also very difficult to go down. It's easier, I think, to go up it than to go down it, and then going down into Breckenridge on the other side is a nice way to go that way as well. So I've done that a couple of times, actually, slack pack that segment. What is that, segment 6, 7?
That's segment 7.
7?
Yeah.
Yeah, segment 7 I've done backwards a couple of times. Did coming in from the pass into Breckenridge the first time, I think we did a Nero of about 12 miles, and then spent the next day as a 0. And then the next day we slack packed back to Breckenridge. So I actually spent 3 days there, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree. I did it from Gold Hill to Copper with my bag years ago. Well, I didn't know. And it was the beginning of a segment hike, a lash. And so we hauled our packs over that beast, and it was awful. And then a couple years later, Mo and I and our other family member, Bubblicious, just went for a day hike, and we did Copper to Frisco, which there's just a split. And so much better. So much better with a day pack, and so much better to come up from the Copper side than to go down it, especially with a pack. So definitely, and then the other thing with that is Breckenridge or Frisco, you can stay in. Breckenridge has a couple hostels. Frisco has a couple motels and Airbnbs, which is becoming a much more popular way to stay in a trail town. And so either of those are good. There's also a hostel in Silverthorne, which is not far away.
Yep. Yep, a couple of things there about the hostels. The Bivy hostel is among the nicest I've ever stayed in. It's really incredible. The rub is that they don't answer phones, so make sure that you are. I've tried hundreds of times, and I'm not exaggerating. So make sure you're really clear on when you're going to get there and that you have your room booked. But it is. I've stayed in a lot of hostels, and it is probably the nicest I've ever stayed in. So it's well worth it if you can get in. I do
It's
think.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I do think that that section of the trail is, the steepness cannot be underestimated coming from Copper or going down into Copper. It really is one of the steeper parts of the trail. It's certainly the steepest part of the trail between Denver and Leadville, so far as I can remember. I can't think of any that are steeper than that for a sustained amount of time. I definitely tumbled down that hill a couple of times when I was hiking it a couple of years ago. And Jerry here, hashtag his trail name, he brings up an important point about that, is that this is one of the first really exposed areas, because if you're coming from the Gold Hill trailhead all the way to the top of the 10-mile range, 11-mile range, I always get it messed up, whatever the top of that crest is very exposed, and even getting to there is tough because there was a forest fire there, so it's all clear cut. It's very exposed, and then you get up on the top, and it is, I've been up there, I've done that section I think 3 or 4 times now, and 3 times I've been caught in lightning or hailstorms. So the recommendation that I have specifically for slack packing or packing it is you want to do this section early. And so that's a tough one because a lot of people do zeros or Neros in Breckenridge and then sort of roll out of bed and hit the trail at 9-10 in the morning. That's not the way to go, because it's really scary to be up there in a long sustained exposed area. But if you get up there at the right time, where it's a little bit earlier and safer, it is among the most beautiful sections of the trail all the way. I mean, it's just really incredible. Super cool. You're on the sort of razor's edge. You're looking to the left down in Breckenridge, to the right down in Copper. Really pretty incredible. Actually, Elderberry here, who mentioned something about the shuttlers list, bumped it. I actually met Elderberry here on the top of that, and we said hello, did a couple of photos, and then both of us raced because we then got caught in a hailstorm. And just as a note, if you're in a hailstorm with great big Dumbo ears, it hurts, because you put your head down and they catch you real good. I did want to circle back here. We've got Karen's in the group and has 2 really helpful pieces of information I want to make sure everybody catches here. One is that the RTD train is $10 from DIA to Union, and then onward to Littleton Mineral, which leaves you 10 miles from Waterson Canyon, which is really helpful. That's a really close trip, and it's also in an area that's populated enough that you'll have no trouble picking up an Uber from there should you choose that route. It's also worth staying downtown or staying in a hotel that first night, and this way you wake up early and get that shuttle early. But this information still applies very much to that. And as she points out here, lots of options near Littleton Mineral Station for hotel, motel, and Airbnb. And she runs an Airbnb there nearby as well. So Karen, feel free to put in the chat some of the helpful details for folks to find your Airbnb, especially if it's somebody here in the Colorado Trail community. We'd love to send some folks your way as well. Now let's talk a little bit here. What do you think about hammocks? This is easily one of the most common questions I get from folks. They ask if you can hammock camp on the trail. This is often one of those things that comes from those folks who are coming from out east. It's definitely much more popular on the East Coast, those hammock campers. What do you all think? Could you hammock camp it? If so, what are your cautions? If not, why not?
Well, I backpack not on the CT, but with a hammocker, and we've been all over Colorado and done pretty well. But we do not have perfect trees for hammocking or for bear hanging. They're scrawny, they're far apart. It is what it is. So you're going to spend significant more time as a hammock person than as a freestanding tent person for looking for a site, for sure. Not impossible. And I always recommend that you are able to go to ground with your hammock setup. So you need to go on YouTube and watch videos of how to go to ground, which just means that you're securing your your little tarp as a tarp on the ground. You're going to need to guy line it out and do all the things. So because there are, especially down south after Lake City, there's that, 33 miles of exposed above tree line the entire time.
Yeah.
And you are going to have to go to ground at some point in your Colorado Trail hike. Mo and I are both freestanding tent users. We were traumatized in 2021, a little CTSD from the rain and hailstorms every single day.
Yeah.
I can set up my freestanding without getting it wet inside, and I don't know that I could do that with a hammock. It would definitely be a learning curve situation, but something to keep in mind.
Yeah, also, some people don't realize how cold it can be in the Rocky Mountains during midsummer. I mean, we can even get snow at times in July and August up in the mountains. So you need to be prepared for cold weather. And oftentimes, hammock sleepers tend to sleep colder. And so that's something to consider as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe a warmer underquilt sort of setup. Yeah.
Certainly one that you would need. I did hike twice with Winging It, my hiking buddy, and he does hammock camping. And basically the sort of trade-off that he makes there is he has to often stop earlier in the night or hike on farther because there are no trees where he wants them, or he needs to stop and take trees when he knows that they're going to be there. One of the things CT Mom pointed out there is that there is a section after Spring Creek Pass. So Spring Creek Pass is at mile 357. It's where you would catch a hitch down into Lake City, which you absolutely should. We're going to talk trail towns here in a second. But at Spring Creek Pass, you'll then hike 9 miles. So that would be, mile 366. You'll basically pop up above the trees, and you won't go back down below trees for the next 32 miles. And so it is a lot of exposure there without trees. It's very, very tough. And it's one of those where you certainly want to be cognizant of it, no matter tent or hammock camping. But it certainly is one of those places where it's almost impossible to do that stretch without going to the ground, as you pointed out. So a lot of people do it. My personal recommendation, and you kind of got at this a little bit, CT Mom, is that I think a tent is just the way to go, because there are so many afternoon storms that it really is helpful to be able to pop up your tent, sit in it, and wait out a storm, because they're not usually those storms that sort of stay and linger, that it will be an hour and a half, 2 hours of really tough weather, and then it will clear. So it's good to be able to have that tent you can set up, huddle in it. If you've got, some cards or a friend with you, you can play some cards, kill the time, read a book, whatever it is. But I really like the tent for it. And I'm not opposed to hammock camping, but I do think that it would be tough. Now, before we move past this, I'd also mention that a lot of people, when they're talking about the hammock camping, they talk about this section behind me with the Collegiate West, and they're worried because it's higher in elevation. I actually don't think it'd be hard to camp in the Collegiate West with a hammock. It's actually kind of where it would get easier, because the trees tend to get a little bit smaller and more spread out. So it's certainly easier through the Collegiate West, generally speaking. It just would require you often to stop a little sooner than you might want, because when you do start going above tree line, you'll be able to see. You've got a long time before you come back down, and the Collegiate West is cool for being able to see that, see the distances. Which actually kind of, let's transition from that. This is a really common question that I hear from a lot of folks. Should I go east or west around the collegiates? There's one answer to this, and I'm going to let one of you all tell me what it is. There you go.
So I went east. I never did the west. I have plans, obviously, to complete it, and I have, love-hate situation with the east. It's rough. It's brutal. You go very down and you come right back up. When I did it, it was so hot, which I think is something that gets a little overlooked in planning. Even as a native Coloradan, I was shocked at how hot it was. The sun is really intense here, and exerting yourself in that intense sunshine is brutal. So keep that in mind. But the east is fine. I don't know why you guys don't like it. I don't know. There's a ton of 14ers from the east. What about that?
There are a ton of 14ers, and you get to climb them without actually reaching the summit, and that's part of the rub. I mean, here's the thing: is I've done both of them twice at this point, and if I get to come out this summer, it'll have to be east. We can talk about that a little later. That's a little teaser for you all, that there's a chance I might be able to make it out this year, but the plans will require a trip over the east again, which I'm not super looking forward to, especially knowing what's out west. What I can tell you is that a lot of people get nervous with the West, specifically because what they end up thinking is, because it's higher in elevation, they think the West is harder. And certainly the photo that I took behind me here, this is from Hope Pass. I consider this the hardest climb on the entire trail, which certainly can be intimidating because it's how you start the West, right? You leave Twin Lakes, you start climbing this thing. It's 3,000 feet over 4 miles, which when you get into the math, it's really tough. But that being said, if you go east, the next 3 climbs you take out of Twin Lakes are the second hardest climb, third hardest climb, and fourth hardest climb on the whole trail. And it's really hot. It's really exposed. The water is present, but it's also, you never really get above tree line, so the views aren't nearly the same. There's the Harvard Lakes, which is beautiful, but overall, there's just no comparison. There's just none. So I encourage folks to go west. For a lot of different reasons, not the least of which is that it's 80 of the most beautiful miles on the trail. And I think if you told me they were the most beautiful miles in your opinion, I wouldn't argue that in the San Juans for sure. We've got a great question here from Bill. What's your longest distance between resupply? He's doing Collegiate West. What do you all think?
Let me see. It depends on how much food you want to pack, I guess. I guess I like to stop every once in a while for a day or two, but I don't like to do it too often. So I would say maybe 100+ miles. I don't know. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think the longest distance on the CT, and I don't know if west or east plays into this at all, but it's like Sagwatch to Creed, right? What is that, 16 to 20? Maybe the segments ish, I think, is technically the longest, where it's really hard to get to a resupply. So I want to say that's like 80 miles. I don't believe it's 100.
Yeah, like getting to Breckenridge, for example, is about 104 miles, I think, from Waterton Canyon.
Oh, so it must be more than that. It's got to be more than that then.
Yep.
Got to be more than, it's got to be like, maybe it's like 108. I don't know.
It's just as a point of reference, the Highway 50 crossing there at Monarch Pass, that's at mile 252. So it's 105 from there to Spring Creek Pass. Okay. And so it's not off, but the difference is that it's they're hard miles, and there's no real, on the way to Breckenridge, there are a handful of places you can dip off and go to Jefferson and hitch and get a resupply. That's at mile 72. I want to say they're at Kenosha Pass. You can also hop off at Bailey or get a hitch. It's about 8 miles off trail. So there are options on the way, where when you get across Highway 50, that sort of turn by Salida, then you go all the way. You have to go all the way to Creed, which requires some massive sort of detour, which you can't get a shuttle because it's sort of a 4x4 road, and then you hit a regular dirt road, and it's a tough one. Girl Plus Dog Adventures details. She might be able to tell you a little more about that stay in Creed, which is incredible, by the way. Creed is a super cool town. But then the option most people choose is either Creed or Lake City. I personally prefer Lake City just because there's a big climb right when you get back from Creed. So the turnoff to Creed is right before this 1,000-foot climb. That can be really tough if you've got a fresh resupply. But all that being said, I think Mo's right. About 100 miles would be about the most that you'd want. But the cool thing about the CT is that it's very accessible for hitches or shuttles. And so it's super easy to jump in and out of town, even on the Collegiate West, because it's probably easier to get to town from the west, because when you cross NCW2, you're at Cottonwood Pass Trailhead, which is a paved parking lot right at the top of the pass. So everybody coming in from Buena Vista will pause, like stop in, check out the scenes, and then go right back to Buena Vista. So you can often catch a hitch pretty easily from there as well.
But again, most of the resupply distances on the CT are not hard at all. They're really it basically between the 3 trails, I would say, the AT or the Vermont Trail is the most accessible. You could stop every 3 days if you wanted to. You're just in towns because it's developed back east. The JMT had much longer carries, especially starting out or ending, depending on which direction you're going. But between Mammoth and like Mount Whitney, there's
really nothing. Yeah, you kind of have to make your way out pretty far from there, and it's expensive, to send something to VVR. No.
MTR and VVR, but they're so different. So you're not going to town. You're stopping at this weird little shack in the woods and getting a bucket, which is great.
They send you to the back, and they're like, "Do not let our real guests see you or smell you."
We won them over. Of course we did. They loved us. We had chats. We had a good time. But the CT is somewhere in the middle of those two.
Yeah.
Between being super accessible and super remote. Every 4 to 5 days, you're going to be in town. You're going to be able to get, grocery stores. You're going to be able to resupply on the go. All of those things.
Yeah.
There's post offices. There's all the things that you need to resupply at. So it's very easy. It's not the biggest heavy carry in the whole world. So
yeah, you make a great point there about the grocery stores. I think a lot of people, I've done this before where I pack up resupply boxes and I ship them. And what I end up doing is picking up my resupply box from a post office next to the grocery store that sells all the same stuff that's in my box. And so it's certainly, unless you have a very specific diet where you need to make sure you have, say, gluten-free or, vegan, those sort of things, then in those cases, it's probably wise to send things along, especially when you get farther away from Denver. In Leadville and Salida, you'd probably be fine. But by the time you get out to Lake City, it would be very difficult to plan something. And certainly Silverton, those would be really tricky as well. But you don't have to send a resupply box in most cases with a little bit of planning. And if you did, maybe send it to Twin Lakes, I think would be the one spot that I might consider. The Twin Lakes General Store, and they've been really good to CT hikers in the past, so they're a good one to support as well. I want to talk. Oh, go ahead, Mo.
What I was going to say is one thing I found helpful is being a Prime member. I would order things from Amazon and not have to worry about paying shipping. A lot of people spent a lot of money because the boxes are heavy, and so the shipping costs are quite expensive. So shipping from Amazon, your meal resupplies and whatnot is a good way to go, especially for those people who might not find meal choices available on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. And you can, if you book hotel rooms in advance, you can have them sent there. If you do Airbnbs, a lot of times those people will be willing to do that. It gets a little trickier because if you're going to a set like reservation, that timeline is always really tricky. I think that can be tough because almost always your timeline will get bumped off course for one reason or another. So, but anyway, to your point, I think having shipping stuff directly to where you're going to pick it up, that's brilliant. I mean, just brilliant. It's a really great way to go. Let's talk while we're talking about food here. Let's talk here about the idea of food storage. Now, I have hard opinions on this. If you go back, you'll see Girl Plus Dog Adventures mentions right after this question that I have a very strong feeling about this. But what do you all think?
Yeah, I've done it all the ways over the years. So the first trip out was throwing a rock and a string and hanging a bear bag. And like I sort of said a little earlier, that's not great in Colorado. The PCT hang is difficult. It takes a long time to find the right tree and get the right setup. I carried an Ursack to save weight and ended up not saving that much weight. Did not love it. Wasn't, we've had a couple of incidents on the trail where they've gotten ripped open. The bear did not get the food, but your food was ruined. Covered in bear slime, and you don't want to eat that. So now I carry a bear can for every backpacking trip I go on.
One thing that's nice too about the bear canisters is they make a nice place to sit.
Yeah, they do.
Multi-use, yeah.
Yeah, they make a great place to sit. If you don't want to sit up, you can actually use them really well as a lumbar support. So put your sleeping pad on it, and you've got a great lumbar support. Jam it next to a tree. That works really nicely. I actually the last year I was out on the CT. Just below where this photo was taken behind me, there was a bear that did get into an ursac, and it was very aggressive. And actually, the three women who were trying to scare the bear away, the bear squared up on him and was ready to go. So they had to back off, and then it really messed some things up. There's also, there's currently a lawsuit. I don't know where it sits, but the URSAC guy is suing to make them legal in the Sierra, which is, from my understanding, again, I'm hearing this secondhand, is will very much get bears much more comfortable with people, because even if they don't get the food, they still get the taste of food. So Ursacs have some, my personal preference is not to use them, because they do seem to be not great for the wildlife. And really, when we're out there trying to protect our food, we're trying to protect the wildlife as much as ourselves, and future hikers from having to go out there and do that. carry the heavier stuff. But excuse me, just make sure that you're doing best practices. I still think if you have an ursac, it's a good idea to hang it, just like you would sort of do the counterbalanced hang. Again, these are hard opinions from a cranky old dude in Chicago, so take that for what you will. But I love the bear canister. I love it particularly if this is your first big adventure, because it's one variable that you have no worries about, and you can use the bear canister to protect your electronics in some of those afternoon storms. You can keep stuffing stuff in it after you start eating the food. You can put other stuff in to shrink the size of your pack. There are a lot of different ways to go about it, but I think they're all pretty fine generally, and you're going to be okay. But you might there might be more problems in the future, and I would imagine that there's a chance that bear canisters will be required soon. There's already some indication that that's coming.
Just real quick on that question with he was asking, well, she was asking about the 450 versus the 500. And as a single person, I mean, it's hard to know. Like Mo's a big guy. I don't know, but when I'm a little person, don't eat that much. So it's like, I think that might determine it a little bit more. Basically experience will teach you how much, whether you need the 450 or the 500. Mo and I both carried 500 in the Sierra, and we had a planned 10-day carry. Okay. Ended up being about 8 because we're so fast, but had 10 days of food on us. And we only had to use the bear can like the first night, second night. So like really 8 days of food we carried. So there's nowhere on the CT that's that long. So I would say a 450 would be more than sufficient for me.
And another thing to consider is some people have smaller packs than others. Make sure that you bring your pack with you when you go shopping, just to make sure that it's going to fit okay in there.
Yeah, and hashtag there, he's going to be in good shape. He knows he's a pretty seasoned hiker, so I'm sure he's going to be fine on that. But you make particularly some great points there, CT Mom, about how you go about assessing what will fit, and also the same thing, Mo, making sure that you can fit it into your pack, because those bear canisters, as much as I like them, they are awkward. They don't fit neatly into a lot of packs because they're a barrel shape. So they're not my favorite shape for sure. They can be unwieldy. So definitely take your backpack when you go to purchase them and check them out. That being said, it's also worth knowing that you can it's also worth knowing that when you're planning it, you might need, like, if you need 5 days, you only have to be able to fit 4 days in your bear can, because the first day you're going to eat before you stop for the night. So make sure that you just remember that when you're packing and sort of practicing. That's something that I'm sure hashtag already knows, but everybody else who's maybe starting this as their first big trip, that's certainly something that's worth knowing, and it's helpful for planning. Now we've got this one here. This is a great question, specifically because this might go in the top 3 of most commonly asked questions. And what do you all think?
I did not plan on driving back. I got on a little app called Hopper, and I think the flight back to Denver was like $60 or $70, and so that's what I planned on doing. So I didn't have a vehicle waiting for me. I live in Colorado. I could have had my wife come and pick me up. But ultimately, there was another group that was going back, and so I ended up not even using my flight and just caught a ride with somebody else.
Yeah, same. I planned for my husband to come get me, so I didn't leave a car. I will say, so there's a lot of different ways to get back. You can take Mustang, you can take a flight. As far as I know, parking in Durango, I believe you can park at the airport in Durango, which is not too far. You could definitely hitch or whatever to get back to your car. There was that limousine guy who allowed you to park there. I think he's still up. Buckhorn, maybe. I don't know. You might know Snack Bucks.
Yeah, it's something like Buckhorn Limousine or something, and they let you park. They're a little bit pricier, but they're good to have because if you say you end up at Mullis Bass and you can't finish the trail for some reason, then you've already got a contact who knows exactly where to go. It is pricier, but also just as a another detail there, you can park at the Durango Airport, and it's only $10 a day. And I do think that's a great idea because then you're not fixed on getting to, say, a certain flight on a certain date, or you're not set for, you can get to Durango whenever you get to Durango at $10 a day. It's not bad.
Yeah. I mean, logistically, Durango's pretty easy to get back to Denver from. So either through the Mustang, it's a long roundabout, right? But it works. It'll take you 2 days.
I think they just added, I could be wrong. Somebody in the chat, let me know. I think they just added a direct route from Durango last year.
There was something so that you didn't, I don't know that it was direct. You still had to change buses in Junction, but you didn't have to stay the night, I believe.
No, I think that's what they took away is like, I think now it goes, I don't know. Somebody correct, but I don't. Yeah, I think it's a legit like direct. You hop on in Durango and you hop off the same bus in Denver, but it's like 8 hours later. I could be completely pulling this out of my butt.
No,
but I'm fairly certain. I want to also point out here one of the things that I love about this question, that leaving the car in Durango is such a great way to go if you're going to take a car. Also, Mo makes a great point that flights are not terribly expensive, especially if you plan ahead. I think there's maybe 2 days a week they do a flight that's like $40 over, and you pay for your bags or whatever. That's a good way to go. You can also rent a car, and if you're planning ahead, that's a pretty great way to go because then you don't have to worry about things like check-in trekking poles and what about if you have fuel in your bag. I like the Mustang for that reason, and I also like the idea of renting a car for that reason. So both of those are good routes as well. And there's a lot to be said for not having a car with you, because if you're paying $280 for a 4-week hike just to park your car, which I think is about the most inexpensive option, and then you're paying for a flight or transportation back to Denver and then all the headache, I think you could probably figure that out less expensively without a car.
I know everyone is different as to how planning of a person they are. I took 3 hikers back with me to Denver, so they hitched with me. Mm-hmm. Mo, same thing, where there was one car and they just filled it up with all the family members and took them all back. It sounds crazy especially if it's your first through hike, but after hiking 500 miles, you're going to have met some friends.
Yep.
You're going to be very outgoing when asking for rides and for free stuff. So when you get to Durango and you're celebrating over your Colorado Trail Nut Brown Ale at Carver's, you very well could get a ride. At least halfway, if not the whole way. You're going to be so used to hitching, and it's not really hitching, it's people you know. So
yeah,
I know it's scary. I could never, but
yeah, I think a good way to think about it is that, when you start the trail, there are certain things you turn your nose up at, or you maybe are nervous about. And then by the end of the trail, you're going to be like, yeah, I dropped my sandwich on the ground, I'm going to eat it. Or, I don't want to poop outside turns into, I'm going to go right here and you all better turn around because I'm doing this whether or not you're watching, that sort of thing. Your tolerance for things goes up infinitely faster than you would imagine. So even if you're a little nervous, I will say that it is a good idea to think about. I mean, if you're say a solo hiker, a lot of say women, for instance, who solo hike it, their families might not feel comfortable with them going out, or they might not feel comfortable hitching, that sort of thing. And it is very doable to do the trail without hitching. And so I'd encourage you to check out. I did do a video, an updated one on how you can resupply without hitching the whole entire trail. So there's a plan on that as well. But to CT Mom's point, hitching in Colorado is a different creature. I wouldn't recommend you do it if you're not comfortable, but it's not the same thing as like the New Jersey Turnpike where, it's just not the same. It's a different kind of environment as well.
I started out being very unsure about hitchhiking, and partway through, man, I was flagging down semi trucks and whatnot, getting the whole family on board one vehicle, and so you just get used to it after a while, and it's fun.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you meet some really terrific folks, and you start talking to them and hearing their stories, and it's often really incredible because the folks who pick you up, you don't get picked up by people in Mercedes, you get picked up by people who have been living in the mountains for years, and they understand what it's all about, and they're ready to help. And I think that's the other sort of philosophical or perspective shift that I would tell people to make is that if you're nervous about people on the trail, remember that you're far more likely to meet somebody on trail who wants to help you than anybody who wants to hurt you. It's just a different community, and it's a really nice thing to be a part of. I'll also say to Mo's point and to CT Mom's point about Tramilies, I've never set foot on the Colorado Trail without making a friend that I keep up with still. There's nothing like it where you will meet people who are quickly your best friends. There are a couple of women actually that I met one of them at a meetup here in Chicago, and then I met the other one in Waterton on the first day of my hike last year, and they ended up meeting that same day. They're now best friends, and they're taking off on the Continental Divide Trail in a couple of weeks together. And so it's a place where friendships are made for life, and it's really special in that way, which will help you feel safer if you do decide to hitch, that kind of thing as well. This one here from Backpacking Vibes, we got a great question coming in. Are you all ready for this one?
Maybe.
Favorite trail towns?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, I love Salida and Lake City personally, and Breckenridge were awful fun places. Just terrific.
Yeah, I think Lake City is where I met my tramily, so it has a special place for me. Because I met Momo here for one thing, but so that was life changing. But God, they're all good. I went to Leadville, and not a lot of people do, because I think a lot of folks stop in Twin Lakes or I don't know what you do on the west, but Leadville was rad, and it doesn't get as much love, I think. And then I never went to Silverton, but I mean, I've been there, like, tourist. But
Silverton's fun too. Yeah,
Silverton's supposed to be pretty good.
They've got some nice hostels there for sure.
Yeah, they're all rad. But Lake City was just a different vibe. It is a special place. Good for the people watching. Pretty incredible.
It's an interesting place too. I mean, it has interesting people that live there year round, and interesting visitors in the summer that come from southern states. But it does have a great vibe, and it's so walkable.
Yep. I think it's the most remote city, there's something like most remote county in the country, or Colorado. I mean, it's very remote, but it's known for having deer in the front yard. So you'll be walking to pick up your resupply or do laundry, and you'll see a giant 12-point buck sleeping in somebody's front yard, and the people are just watching TV on the right behind them. And then it's a really great one. There's a hostel there that's been there forever called the Ravens Rest, and Lucky there is the guy who runs it. That's not to be missed. It's a really fun experience. So when you get into town, be sure you go straight there and get your bed, because it fills up quickly. But I love Lake City. I think that one's really great. I do love Creed as well. That's a fun town. It's just a little harder to get to. I think that's a really fun place. Salida is high on my list of favorites. By the way, just as a note for everybody, I know that the Spanish is Buena Vista and Salida, but the locals will know that you are not from there if you say it that way, that they will correct you, or it's pronounced differently when
It's
you're in the
Buena
mountains.
Vista.
Buena Vista. I don't think that's true either.
No,
I think I think
Buena.
you're setting people
call
up
it
to get.
Buny. If you're
What?
local, you call it
Colorado
Buny.
native.
Just call it BV. I was born
I
in
would trust
Colorado too. Thank you very much. So,
Traitor.
The
you,
locals call it Buny.
yep. Also, as a point of note, it's Colorado, not Colorado. So, unless you're drinking tea with your pinky up, it's Colorado, like Rado.
Colorado.
So remember that as well. No, but I do think that Breckenridge is a lot of fun. I think, there aren't many towns along the way that aren't to be seen. Leadville is a lot of fun as well. There's a really great pizza shop there in Leadville and a great hostel, maybe 2 great hostels in Leadville. So lots of great stuff. BV I really enjoy as well. There's a place called the Trailhead, which is a great spot to resupply. There's a public shower in BV. So if you just want a day in town, there's one red light in BV. So when you're coming from the trail, you go straight through the red light until the road turns right, and it's right there on the corner. You can't miss it. So there is
One
a
in
public
Leadville is well, public shower.
Yep. And there's one in the laundromat too.
Laundry, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the important thing about the CT is that our mountain towns are miles above anyone else's. We have the best trail towns out of any trail. Just boom. Right there.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably true. I think there are some fun trail towns on other trails, but there's just, the sheer number of cool trail towns along the CT, it just doesn't. You've got on the JMT, you've got Bishop and Mammoth are a lot of fun, and that's it, and so that's really kind of where you are.
One thing to mention about Lake City that's really nice is that they have a shuttle that they set up. I think that it's 4 p.m. every day. You either go to Creed one direction or to Lake City the other direction. And Lake City really wants people to show up. So a couple of things is, one is that they'll pick you up every day and take you into town, so you don't have to hitch. You can hitch if you get there at a different time, try it, but if you can get there by 4 p.m., then they'll give you a ride into town. And then also on Sunday, they have another shuttle that's at noon. And the nice thing about that is the churches sponsor a free dinner for trail trash like us. And so you just show up, and they rotate it from church to church every single week. And you show up and they'll have hot dogs or hamburgers or something like that, and you can really chow down. So that's kind of nice too. The town really welcomes hikers and wants them there.
Yep. It is. It is, to your point, Mo. It's really the towns along the way, generally speaking, are very welcoming. And so that's both a testament to the sort of environment along the trail, but also it's a good reason for people to just know to be good ambassadors of the trail community. That, there were some folks who misbehaved a bit at the Twin Lakes General Store, and it's just not a good look for us. So when you're out there, just be a good ambassador, have some fun, but also don't be a jerk to the locals, so that we can keep those towns being as friendly as possible to us, because they really are terrific in my experience as well. Really great folks there. We've got a couple, this one here from hashtag as well, which has the best walk and resupply, Creed or Lake City? That one's probably going to be Lake City, Jerry. So it's they have a grocery store there proper. There is a small grocery store in Creed, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's a little tougher to get there. And you'll have to get to Scott's point there. You will have to get a ride, but they will have the sort of grocery store that you can shop at and pick up your stuff. And it will be bigger than the one in Creed. Now, Creed is cool. If you plan ahead, you can certainly ship your resupply there. And it's got like a theater there, like an old timey theater. It's really rustic and lots of good spots to grab pizza, that kind of thing. But I think Lake City is probably the move. But Details here, who is always correcting me on everything ever, always. Just kidding, everybody. That's the love of my life. She mentions here that Creed Grocery is great and they have a brewery. So I think that's maybe changing our mind a little bit about where Jerry should go. All right. How are we holding up, everybody? Feeling good?
Good.
All right. Tell me this. So I was going to ask you all for your favorite Colorado Trail memory to wrap us up here. So we can either go with that, or you can tell me the biggest mistake you've made on the Colorado Trail so that people can learn from that, especially bonus points if it's hilarious.
My favorite memory is all the people that being able to develop a great tramily on the trail. So that was the most meaningful and important thing to me. And I learned the hard way about monsoonal rains in Colorado. So I think it was, let me see, about 2 days before getting to Kenosha Pass. Everybody set up their tent, and I'm like, well, it's all clear. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to cook my dinner first, and then I'll set up my tent. Well, before I could finish cooking dinner, it rained like crazy and everything got soaked. Well, I mean, not as wet as maybe as it could have been like the next evening. So the next evening, it was sad. So I learned my lesson from the day before. It's like, I'm setting my tent up first. I'm going to get it done. I'm not going to worry about food. Everyone else was getting their food taken care of, and they were eating. I'm setting up, and just as I got the tent laid out, this monsoonal rain dumped down, and it filled the entire bathtub of the tent up. They called it Moe's Aquarium. And so I learned that you just have to play it by ear and really watch, and you really need to be able to set up your tent quite quickly and at the appropriate time. So practice.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. I did it over years. So I did long ass section hikes over 4 years. And so I had a lot of really good memories. The memories for me are bookended by a lot of mistakes. I came off trail multiple times for reasons I wouldn't now. And every single one of those was a learning experience. Just walk further and there will be water. Just, set up your tent and you'll warm up. You're not hypothermic. You're fine. I had enough food. I thought I didn't, but I did. I would have been okay. I probably could have asked somebody for a Snickers, but all of them were learning experiences. There's no worse feeling than quitting trail. And there's no better feeling than knowing that I picked up and kept going and did it, even though it was hard. So all of mine are love-hate situations. They're all the worst and the best at the same time.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point too. That you just have to everybody's going to make a lot of big mistakes. What you're willing to deal with and what you're skilled to deal with will grow, and so they're a lot of fun to kind of look back on those things that those missteps in the past. I do remember just a really great day hiking with the two of you, and I remember right before that spot past Lake City where. You go up above tree line. I remember just sitting with you all and we were making food and everybody was cooking and trying to decide if we were going to push on above tree line or stick around for the night. And I just remember it being a lot of fun that time. But my biggest Colorado Trail mistake, I think, is when I did the loop. This was my first time on the CT, and I had a bit of sort of bad experiences in the past with water filters where, I took a light once and the battery died. I took a pump once and it got clogged with silt. And I took I forget what else I did, a couple of different things. So I took extra fuel thinking if I needed to boil water, I'd need to do that. And I took 3 of the regular sized canister fuels and 1 of the small ones. And when I finished the hike, I almost made it through the small one. And the other 3 just got a grand tour of the Rocky Mountains in my backpack. And I still think of that as one of those, a classic first mistake. You overpack and then you look back on it. But I will say my pro tip for everybody, by the way, I carry a fresh pair of socks for every day I'm going to be on trail, and it is worth its weight in gold. The blisters get minimal. It's just the way to go. Wearing old socks that you've washed in the creek just leads to blisters in my experience. So carry some socks. So here, I think we've got Jay Mash has our final question here for the night. I'm glad he's popping in here. He says he only has time for 6 days. Jerry, I believe it's Jerry as well. We got 2 Jerrys. So correct. I'm sorry, Jerry, if I've got your name wrong. But I'm fairly certain it's Jerry. Is going to hike 6 days. And here's what I was going to tell him, and tell me what you all think about this. My thought is he flies into Durango, gets a shuttle to Mullis Pass, and spends the 6 days hiking the 70 miles back to Durango and hits the San Juans. He's going in mid-July, so it should be clear by then, knock on wood, or he'll know it's not clear. And yes, it is Jerry. And so I think 6 days is a really great amount of time to settle in. I think especially if you get there and you go slow the first day or two, it's still very doable. That would be my pick. It's not only the most beautiful section of trail, but it's also very accessible by way of catching shuttles flying in and out of Durango.
What elevation does Jerry live at?
So he is in Alabama. So he is.
That might be
that's not
good.
Yeah, but there's not really a 6 day section that I think
downhill.
Mostly downhill. That last section 28, is like you could trip and roll all the way into the trailhead, right?
I did. Yeah. It's brutal.
Yep.
I think that is a great plan. The only other would be anything that's easily accessible by, right, like logistically, you can get on at Kenosha or Breckenridge or whatever and make a 6 day section. I think if you started it at 6, right? If you start at Gold Hill at Breck and go for 6 days, you probably hit a bus in like Leadville or something. And
yeah, you can make it to Leadville or BV. Yeah, that would be doable. I mean, BV would be, what would that be? Mile 170, so about 70 miles as well, depending on which route.
And that's quintessential Colorado. I mean, whether you do the west or the east, but it's if you do the sections, that's the. I think logistically, just doing the west is a little bit tougher. So the segments before that would just be logistically easier.
No, I like that idea. Fly into Denver. You can catch the shuttle all the way to Breckenridge, hop on at Gold Hill. That's going to be mile 104. And then hike all the way down to the Cottonwood Pass trailhead, 2 sections into the west. Take a hitch into BV, and I think in BV you can catch that bus all the way back to Denver. And so that would be logistically relatively easy. Elderberry here has a great tip though, is this is a bucket list one because I don't think it's super inexpensive, but that would certainly be my top route, right? Fly into Durango, take the narrow gauge rail all the way to the stop near Mullis, hop off there, and then hike. The one rub is that if you hopped off at Mullis, then you would be climbing immediately out of there, which could be kind of tough, but certainly would be really cool to do. Take your time, just be patient and eat a lot of food and drink a lot of water, even if you start feeling like you don't want that. That's the way to go. And Jerry did say that he did the San Juans and he lives in Texas, so he was okay. So I think and I know the other Jerry is doing some training as well. So I think it's potentially pretty decent, and leaving Mullis Pass is not super aggressive climbing right away. So I think that could be good.
Another option might be if he plans on coming back and doing section by section each year, starting at the beginning and going to Breckenridge, which is easy to get back from as well.
Yeah, that would be a super good plan as well. And if your plan is to sort of piece it together, that would be certainly the way to go, because 104 miles in 6 days is doable for a lot of folks. And if you can't make it all the way to Breckenridge, you can certainly bail at Kenosha and catch a pretty easy hitch as well. So I think that's also a good plan also. Well, you all, this has been the most fun I've had in quite some time. So I'm grateful that both of you joined. You can expect to hear from me again, because I would love to. I'd love to continue this conversation with you all again at another point. So I appreciate you both, Mo and CT Mom. Here we've got. Let me see if I can get the comments and take that one down there. Be sure you follow, like, subscribe, all that cool stuff. And if you follow Backcountry Champion, I've been having some pretty good, just the most ridiculous little Jack Handy style memes And so check those out. They come out every morning, and some of them are, I'd like to say, pretty funny, and some of them are pretty stupid, but well worth a follow, I feel like. So be sure you're there. If you are on the Facebook group page, keep an eye out for Whitney. That's CT Mom. She gives really great feedback. I will agree here with Dane. Trail Mom is a badass. Agreed on that one. And so I think this is just a really, really fun night. So thank you all. Thank you, Dane, for that comment. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, J Mash. Thank you, hashtag backpacking vibes, Elderberry, everybody. Thank you all again. And we will see you again next time in next week. Couple of weeks. And Karen, the Facebook group is the Colorado Trail Through Hikers 2024. There'll be a new one each year, and so you can hop on there, ask questions, and a lot of folks who have hiked it before will answer questions and get really excited about helping other folks have this great adventure as well. So join there. Be sure you're checking that one out as well. I think it's well worth it. And who's the pup? Who is that? What's that one?
It's Bandit.
This is Bandit.
What a good name. What a good name. Bandit, thank you. I'm a little angry you weren't in the camera earlier, so you will make it in next time. Thank you all again. We will see you all soon. The two of you, hang tight, and I will talk to you shortly. But for everybody else, thank you. I really appreciate it. Shoot me messages if you have questions at Backcountry Champion on Instagram. I'll be glad to answer those and field those as well. If you don't hear from me, shoot me another message, because sometimes they get caught up in that little request box. So I thank you all. Have a great night. Take care. Stay warm. See you again.